Hello my dears! Yes, you did read that title correctly, and before you start leaving comments about how I'm anti-autism or whatever, promise me that you will watch a little bit further because I will explain myself, just like wait a hot second. Now, before we go into the reasons why autism is not a superpower and why we shouldn't try to frame it as such, let's list all of the positives of autism that I could find and or think of, because that's fun. And if your auditory processing says nope to 99% of this, know that the majority of these things are just autistic people see the world differently, written in various different ways. Also, these are gross generalizations. If you don't experience all these things, that does not mean you are no longer autistic or something. And if you are allistic or not autistic, they're the same thing, and you experience some of these things, this does not mean that you are automatically necessarily autistic. Cool? Cool. Okay, so here we go. Now, we tend to have a strong sense of justice and fairness, which has actually been corroborated by several studies. One study showed stricter criteria for determining morality, but also that we treat people with different levels of morality relatively equally. And researchers noticed that autistic participants were more averse to harming others, more focused on the principles of being morally good, and more likely to focus on the good in others upon meeting them, rather than their neurotypical peers. Another study showed that autistic people are significantly more likely to reject money obtained through immoral means than their neurotypical counterparts. There's also some ongoing research about how autistic people have a reduced propensity towards implicit social bias and discrimination. But note that I said reduced, not non-existent. I definitely know racist, sexist, anti-trans, autistics. We all still live in a society. Those things do rub off on us too. If you want to learn more about autism and racism, you can check out my video, which is linked over. Anyway, some other things in the category of compassion, justice, and fairness include having a brilliant BS detector, being less likely to lie, being more likely to fight for what's fair, being loyal and generous with time, being less likely to be bothered by social mistakes and embarrassing situations, being open to difference because, well, we know what that's like and what it's like to be left out, so we don't like other people being left out, and often having an acute awareness of other people's pain. We also often form deep bonds with nature, animals, and objects because our connections don't have to rely on verbal communication, much like many neurotypical connections do. As a result of sensory processing differences, we typically take in significantly more information from our environments because of our superior attention to detail, deep focus, and observational skills. Our spatial recognition is unmatched, which is where the stereotype of the autistic who's really good at math comes from, because numbers and space and whatnot, but we also pick up facts and information like sponges when it's of interest to us, and we can become experts on things in record time. We also typically make connections between things significantly faster than neurotypicals do because of our extra neurons and connections, and we are quicker at pattern recognition and therefore seeing flaws in plans. Many autistic people also report having accurate premonitions because we notice patterns and therefore can sense some sort of statistical deviance and when things are going to go wrong. We'll get into that whole thing in another video. It's super interesting, but I just wanted to throw that out there. We also have enhanced auditory pitch discrimination and are 500 times more likely to have perfect pitch than neurotypicals. 500 times! Anyway, also, because we grow up in a world that's not accessible to us and because of our superior attention to detail, we are very creative and original people who often come up with novel approaches for problem solving. We are also very used to having our ideas and our plans and everything that we're trying to do squashed, so our resilience and tenacity is almost unmatched. So whoever tries to insult me by telling me that I am stubborn, yes. We are also great, as I mentioned earlier, with nonverbal communication and finding different ways to communicate on the fly. And speaking of communication, many autistics excel in language learning as well as mimicking accents, voices, movements, and anything else. That being said, autistics typically have a very strong sense of self and stand out in a world that begs us to fit in, which is pretty darn cool. And it definitely took me a really long while to get to the point where I was comfortable with that, but now that I am, I love it so much. And best of all, autistic joy is like absolutely nothing else on this planet. Happy flaps and wiggles and squeals and echolalia and the jumps and everything is just my absolute favorite part, both of being autistic and of having autistic friends, because it's just delightful. So, there. Those are all of the positives I can think of. Please add more into the comments section if you have any, because I would love to hear them. But now that we've said all of the positives, let's remind ourselves that autism is not a superpower. Because, well, first of all, it just is. Autism just is. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be bad. It just is. That's like somebody coming to me and giving me a list of all the good parts of being gay and saying that that's their superpower. Like, heck yeah, being gay is awesome. Go wear a pride flag as a cape, live your life. But also, your gayness is just a part of your existence. It's not a special thing that's good or a bad thing that's bad. Like any other identity, it just has its pros and cons, and it just is. But the idea of autism being a superpower was initially created as a way to counteract the whole autism is a tragedy narrative by instead referring to it as a positive thing and all the superpowers that it gives people. Which, cool, great, awesome, but something doesn't have to be a superpower to be important or valuable or valid. And this idea of the autistic mind being superior is still just as eugenicist as the idea of it being inferior. Not to mention that our minds are not external things. There are humans attached to those brains, humans who are messy and complex and diverse. And sure, some people may be top-tier musicians because of their autism, but others may have the entire Dungeons & Dragons player's handbook memorized to a T because of their autism. Both of those things are just as cool, both of those things are just as important, but society places completely different values on those two things. Because capitalism. We're gonna get into that in another video. Now, by saying the autistic mind is superior, we can do this, this, and this, you're discrediting autistic people who can't do this, this, and this. We are not a monolith, and this kind of thinking contributes to dehumanization and the superiority dynamics within the ableist system that is dominated by neurotypical standards of behavior. So even by saying that we're better, we're still stuck within that degrading, dehumanizing system. So yeah, the autistic mind is incredible, it is, but it's also a pain in the butt, just like any other brain, and shockingly enough, those brains are attached to real people who live real lives where their neurotype is as much of an asset as it is a disability. And I know that I am guilty of talking about only the positives to try to prove to people that I am worthy of existing, and I know that I'm afraid to tell people about the negatives because, well, I'm afraid that it'll just confirm their suspicions that autism is some sort of tragedy or curse. And I can't tell you how many people have apologized to me when I've told them I'm autistic. But it's not a curse and it's not a superpower, it just is. And you deserve to have pride in your neurotype, but also if you don't, that's cool too. Just remember to treat people like people and give them whatever they need best to be the best versions of themselves. Because it's okay to need help, and it's okay to need accommodations, and it's okay to not be okay all the time. That's all for today. That was a bit of a word vomit. As always, thank you for listening, thank you for learning. Remember, your story isn't over, it has only just begun, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one, my dears.